are here today with the Reverend Susan McAllister, who I had the privilege of meeting when she came to my town in College Station, Texas, but she's actually in Ontario, Kingston, Ontario, and she is the minister, right? The primary minister at the Princess Street United Church there in Kingston. But go ahead. I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you came to be at PSUC. We are always interested in hearing about people's journey.
Well, I'm a wife and a mom, and I am a fitness instructor, which Gretchen knows because we've talked about that. And I am a full-time minister or pastor in some circles. That's what it's called. I've been ordained for 18 years, and I've served in several different communities in Canada, mostly Eastern Canada. For those of you who don't know your Canadian geography very well, Kingston is approximately right across the lake, Lake Ontario, from Syracuse, New York. So that might help give people some geographical understanding of where I am.
Other people, not me.
No.
I'm not a geography buff yet.
Well, that's all right. We understand. I'm still learning a lot about the United States geography too. I have been here in Kingston for 3.5 years. I was formerly in Toronto for 10.5 years. And I've always been in ministry in my travels. Prior to ministry, I was a stay-at-home mom and I have 3 daughters. I'm not sure if I said that. And also I worked in retail. That was my background, retail management. So I carry a lot of those skills into ministry because ministry is not only about spiritual nourishment and nurturing, it's also about being with people and managing and all those kinds of things. So that's a bit about who I am.
That's a big jump, retail to pastor. It's
yes.
a big jump. I like though you say, oh, it's related. I think from the outside looking in, some people always think that there's no way. And then you'd be surprised at the types of things that end up coming to be related together.
Yeah, God works in mysterious and marvelous ways. It was never my dream or my intention to become a minister. It was a long story, which I can share another time because we wouldn't have time today. But yeah.
But I feel like that's a lot of people. Very, very seldom do you hear someone say, like, I knew from the time I was 5 years old, I was going to be, leading a church. But it's a calling for sure.
Yes.
And so I mentioned I met you here in College Station, and I was lucky enough to hear one of your sermons. You are just, above and beyond being a minister, you're just an incredible public speaker. And even though I had a 1-year-old that was like running up and down, like I found myself very intrigued, and my husband and I have to take turns being intrigued in church. But
I remember those days well.
But I remember you sharing some stories about ministering to the marginalized there in Canada. And can you explain a little bit about what you meant, both being marginalized and then what ministering to that community fully entails?
Okay, well, I'd like to spend just a moment setting the context. The church where I'm the minister is situated in an area where there are a lot of folks who live and hang out, who are what we call on the margins. They have enough to live on in terms of income for food and housing, but it's barely enough. In Canada, we have quite a good social security net, which helps a lot of folks. It's very basic, but it does support them. But there are extra things that they just don't have enough of. And many of the folks who come into contact with our church who are in that part of their lives have mental illness issues or other physical and mental challenges that preclude them from, say, being in the workforce on a regular basis or functioning in some ways in society. And for many of them, they describe themselves as feeling invisible, not being seen by other people in the world or in this particular community. People ignore them. They don't think they have value or worth because they're not able to function in the way that many of us would. Not that we all don't have our own issues, but
Yeah.
these are more visible and prevalent than perhaps some others have. So that is the description of marginalized that we use. People who rely on some other social services, food banks, free meals or low-cost meals in the community, who rely on social service workers for support to help find housing and to meet their daily needs, that kind of thing. There are people who probably would normally not come into a church unless it was a particular focus of that church's outreach or community ministry, because they are different. Their behaviors don't always, and I hate this word, but I don't know what else to say, conform to people in church. You know, sometimes they yell out, sometimes they get up and wander around, you know, things that you don't expect from an adult. You might from a 1 or 2 year old, but not an adult.
Right. And I think we can understand, you know, what you mean by conforming, because I think we've all felt the need to conform when we've walked into a, you know, church is a great example, but a lot of social situations for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Gretchen. And that's part of the ministry that we're undertaking here, is to be a welcoming community for people who may not always feel welcomed or valued or worthy, or may have had a bad experience in church. We have one young woman, well, she's probably not that young, but we have one woman who stayed away from church for quite a while. She had and continues to have some issues of addiction and other mental health issues, as well as some personal issues with which she really struggles. And she used to attend a church and was basically asked to leave by the pastor who was there because she was so disruptive, etc., and not made to feel welcome. At least that's her story, and I have no reason to disbelieve her. So she has come back to the church, and one of the ways that we have connected with some of the folks is through a Wednesday night service that we're offering. My husband, who is also an ordained minister, Reverend Dr. Susan McAllister, has a ministry called Spirit Renewal Ministries, and I'll give you the information later. And by association, I assist him with that ministry. And Wednesday nights, he started a service at Princess Street United Church. He uses the facility, but it's through his ministry. And that service, because it's very different, it's very casual, there are refreshments beforehand, people can wander in and out, although we encourage them to stay in the sanctuary for the hour. It's very much interactive. People can ask questions. A sermon time is more of a conversation than someone getting up there and preaching for 15 minutes or whatever. And folks have started to come in and feel part of a faith community through that. And then at Princess Street, where I'm the minister, some of those folks are starting to come on Sunday mornings as well. And the congregation has welcomed them. They're not, you know, maybe inside they're thinking, ooh, you know, they're not sure, but through some education and some engagement with them, they're very accepting. So that's how that has all shaped up. I guess I would share it that way. Yeah.
And I think that's really having that kind of ministry that's housed in the same facility. You know, it's in the church. It's not like, oh, we support this ministry down the block at wherever. The fact that the church has opened its doors to be this facility for the ministry, I think is a game changer, because you have to say, well, okay, now we can start to see how can you really be a part of the ministry, not necessarily, you know, here's some money but keep it over there, because
that's right.
Once you get them right, then we'll take them into our church. But until then, you know, and it goes back to that whole like building relationships thing. So yeah, and that kind of goes, and if you need to go backward and tell us more stuff, that's fine. But it's a great segue for something that you told us was in your sermon. You really talked about the idea of treating everyone as you wanted to be treated. And, you know, in my program, we go through and we look at all our little components of wellness. And this is one of the things that comes up in spiritual wellness. when people think you're going to talk about, well, your relationship with God, your relationship, of course, that's important, but the ability to take very seriously the idea that to treat everyone, even when they're dirty, disheveled, they might smell a little funky because maybe that isn't part of their need right now. They don't need to smell good. They need to just survive and get through the day. So if you could like share with us a little bit of the impact you've witnessed by treating people with respect and dignity when others are just treating them as invisible. Like, how has that impacted people?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just step back a little wee bit and give you a little background and context to this. One of the, I would call him a theologian, although he may not call himself this, theologians who has influenced me greatly is a man named Jean Vanier. He is a Canadian, and he went over to France many, many years ago and began a community called the L'Arche community. And that would be capital L apostrophe ARCHE, which means the Ark. And the L'Arche community is a community that has grown worldwide and is for people with developmental disabilities. And I had the great privilege of hearing Jean Vanier speak at an event. And one of the things he talked about that really resonated with me and has shaped how I have engaged in the ministry with the marginalized is the fact that so often we don't want to acknowledge our own challenges and needs. We look at someone else and we say, oh, you know, that person, whatever. But really inside, we're not feeling good about ourselves, and we see ourselves reflected in that person. And he tells the story of how when he first went to live with the two men with disabilities, it was as an assistant, not any kind of other relationship, shall we say. He really struggled with that issue because he came from a very privileged background. His father was formerly the Governor General of Canada, which is a very, very high privileged position. And he had to really look inside himself to see where his spirituality came from, where he was grounded, what shaped him, how he saw the world. And from there, I've read some of his books, etc. And you know, that's another conversation. So that has really shaped how I have engaged people in the spiritual aspect of their lives. And I think that when I look at people or I'm working with them, I see that that's a piece of my own wellness that I need to pay attention to, you know. And from a faith perspective and a biblical teaching, you know, in the first verse of John, the Gospel of John, he says, God so loved, no, that's not it. He said the word
is in John.
Yeah, the word was made flesh. Yeah, I'm a minister. I know this stuff, right?
That's okay. We ministers no one is perfect. It always kind of weirds me out when the person's able to just be like, ta-ta, I found it just right here. I'm like, oh, that's impressive. Like, I've been to church my whole life. I'm still
working on that skill, obviously. No, the first verse of John, when he says the beginning was the Word and the Word was with God and blah blah blah, and I think of that's God's love, and we're all created in that same love. No matter who we are, no matter how stinky we are, no matter how we look, no matter how our mind is or not. Isn't. And I think of the birth of Jesus being in a stable or some place that was not, I mean, God could have had Jesus born in a palace.
Right.
But God chose to bring Jesus to the earth or send Jesus to the earth in a stinky, smelly, noisy stable. And I think, you know, we need to remember that in our faith journey. And so from a place of spiritual grounding is to say, you know, I have to remember that I need to love others as I love myself, but first I have to accept who I am and love who God made me to be. And that to me is the wellness journey.
Yeah. And that is so powerful. And I think, I mean, even me, like, feeling a little conviction here, like, as a teacher, that's a really hard part for me, is to step back and say, okay, like, you go in and listen to whatever that thing was you just did, and make sure that you're not just, saying something and not realizing that it applies to your life. And sometimes that's easy to do. Sometimes it's really hard. And when we're looking at people with the physical, when it's something very overt and obvious, I can imagine that would be even way harder.
Yeah, it is, for sure. It is. Sometimes I just want to plug my nose and walk away, but I can't. I have to just be present with the person. I think the ministry of presence, that's called, if you go into a ministry context, and being present with people. So often people just want someone to be with them. As you talked about earlier, relationship. It's building relationship.
Yeah, and linking, and this is not the first time that we've linked this, or that I've linked this with in interviews like this, linking that idea of social and spiritual. When we can say on the surface, like, oh, it's easy, I go to church and I'm very social at church. I'm like, well, that's the easy part. But can you step out of church and be both, like, spiritual and social at the same time? And really, I mean, the one thing I did after I heard your sermon, the one thing I did, and the one thing I even talked to my group about was, can you just simply, when you pull up, and we have a lot of, not necessarily in College Station, but when you go to Houston, Austin, very close intersections, and you have, the people who are in need and they're holding up the cardboard signs. And I said, can you just make eye contact with them? Like, we don't, because it's going to draw them to our vehicle. And, like, I understand if you're concerned for a safety perspective, that's different. But I mean, if they're just out there, can you just smile and make eye contact?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was challenging myself to do it, and it's hard.
Yes.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Because you don't know what the response will be, and it's making yourself vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's saying, okay, I'm stepping out of my comfort zone into a place that I'm not really sure about, and I don't know what's going to happen. And it's going to challenge me to be someone different, or perhaps different than I really want to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And recognize them as someone that's, like, on your playing field. Like, we're both humans. We're both going through this thing called life. Like, there might be something vastly different happening in their world right now, but you're still, like, at the end of the day, we still want to wake up and have a breakfast and a lunch and a dinner and have a safe place to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. And when you take the time to get to know a lot of the folks, their stories are amazing and powerful. Their resilience, their ability to navigate in situations that many of us would never be able to manage to navigate. It's incredible. And many of them come from backgrounds that are surprising. There are professors, there are, all kinds of people who have lived incredible lives, but for whatever reason, they found themselves in this situation. And so, not that makes a professor any greater than someone who's always lived on the street.
But it's someone who you wouldn't typically think of needing that type of ministry or having.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
And I know you said a little bit, like, some of them now you're seeing them come into the Sunday service. Have there been any other kind of big stories of impact out of that ministry?
Oh boy, that's a good question.
And if I don't want
I think what I'm seeing, Gretchen, is the people coming to Sunday, but also people starting to connect at a deeper level when they do connect with my husband or me as the pastors or ministers of the two ministries, and starting to share their lives and their faith journey, and trusting us with that information, and trusting us to be present with them in our role as the minister. And I don't say that as an ego thing by any means. It's them feeling someone actually cares, someone actually hears me, someone actually listens, and giving them the place and the space to be able to ask those questions, to have those conversations that maybe are niggling away, that they don't get a chance with their social worker or with whomever else.
Yeah.
And to ask those bigger questions and have those conversations. I believe that's really important. And that, again, is part of that relationship, building that trust. Other things, people come and go. Sometimes we can invest a lot of time and energy into somebody, and then they are no longer around, or they've left town, or they've chosen not to come back. That's been a learning for me to be able to let that go and say, you know, it's that. So I'm speaking of something else that's come out of that, is in my own learning and ministry, is to say, you know, I really put my heart and soul into that person, and I tried to help them, and I listened to them, and blah, blah, blah. And then they were gone with no follow through. That's been part of my faith journey, is to accept that God has placed them in my life for that time, and I've been in their life, but they need to move on. And I think that's realistic in many situations.
Yeah, and I mean, the impact definitely, I can imagine there's probably been more impact on you necessarily than like this one case study. And that kind of reminds me, like, as I think, because you're a mom, and maybe like as I would feel this way as a mom, like if I put that much effort into you, I need to see something, because it's how we are. Like, we're going through potty training around here, and I'm like, if I'm going to put in that much effort, then my goodness, there better be some kind of outcome. And yeah, I would have a hard time too, like letting go and be okay with, well, maybe that was just, I planted a seed, right? Like, you might not be the one to harvest that seed, but you were able to plant it.
Yeah. One of the other, I don't call it outcomes, but one of the other things that has happened as a result of this ministry, both at Princess Street and Spirit Renewal, is that we've connected with an organization up the street, and it's called Nightlight. And it is a community drop-in center for the same catchment group, if that's, I don't know if that's politically correct, but that's what I'll use. It's Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings, and they're open from 6 till 9 p.m. And it's just basically a place for people to go, have a coffee, play some board games, sit and talk, whatever, card games, whatever they want to do. They are having to leave that space because, it's a Christian-based ministry, but it's not, people don't have to be Christian to go, and there's no evangelizing when they go in, or proselytizing. It's funded by, yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's an outreach group, and it's there for them. Their building has been sold, and they are in the process of purchasing new space, but it's going to take them a while. So they've approached Princess Street about using part of our building, which is ideally set up for this kind of thing. And we're just in the process of negotiating the rental with them. So we will become their home base for probably up to a year.
Oh, wow.
We're super excited about that, because not that we expect that to put more, you know, what's in the pews.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's an opportunity to be present, as I said to our official board. It is what Jesus would want us to do, right? And there was no resistance. I'm just saying that. So that's a really neat opportunity that's come out of that relationship building over time, and part of our ministry to be more present in and for the community.
And it sounds like your board, your congregation, whoever's making the decisions around there, because I know we can like kid ourselves and think that it is the minister, but like I'm a pastor's granddaughter, and I know that's not where the decisions lie necessarily.
Yeah, that's right.
But it sounds like you have a congregation that's been very like open to hearing truly, like you said, well, that's what Jesus would want us to do. Like, well, that is what we actually need to be doing. We need to be inviting these people in versus sitting around and having our comfort zone, and then like putting other people out there to do the dirty work.
I have come up with it. I've coined a term. I don't think it's anything official. Instead of outreach, I call it inreach.
I love it. I love
I lost you.
Yeah. Oh, you did? Right there? Am I good?
Yeah, it just went unstable for a minute.
Yeah, it does that every now and then. It'll get a little funky. Well, we are just like, I love this. I write questions, and then we typically like tangent all around, and that's just a beautiful thing. But
Good.
I will say, and you shared with me some of your philosophy, and I think you just shared it again, but I'm going to ask you anyway.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we have in common is our love for fitness, and that was, we actually met, I know, and my church held something called Yoga and Tea, which a mutual friend of ours, Christine, actually started this summer, and it was so cool. We had you in, we had another lady in, and we would do yoga, and like everyone would come for the yoga and stay for the conversation, and of course we would drink some tea. And I have a lot of people who come into this. I run a wellness program called Mind into Motion. This chat is called Mind into Motion Chat, although you clearly can be listening to this and not be in the program. But they're looking for physical change, and they expect that the first thing I'm going to do is throw a diet and exercise regimen at them, which doesn't happen for 4 weeks, much to the, and I actually have people drop out in those 4 weeks because they, that's what they want. But we know one of the first things that you need to do is look at all components of wellness, and specifically what we talked about, social and spiritual wellness. And you shared some things with me, and I'll let you share that. But would you tell us a little bit about how, in your opinion, we can really embrace that idea that it's not, we can't just go and do the diet and exercise thing. We have to have a more holistic understanding of what wellness is.
Yes, I would totally agree. That's what I believe as well, that it's a spiritual wellness, body, mind, and spirit, or body, mind, and soul, whatever your 3 words are, I believe are important components. It's the holy trinity of fitness, the triangle, that you can't have one without the other. Because until you're grounded, until a person is grounded in herself and knows who she is, what she wants to do, what she wants to accomplish, what her goals are, and understands, again, I'll go back and repeat something I said earlier, who she's created to be, then one can't really go forward, I think, in a healthy and whole way until there's that trust, that understanding of who we are, and that we need to accept ourselves for who we are, with all our faults, with all our failings, with all our joys, with all our great gifts. We're beautifully and wonderfully made according to the Bible, and I would say that, and everybody has their own challenges and their own joys, and that's because we're human. We're not perfect, and we'd be
so boring if we were perfect.
Oh, can you imagine if we were perfect and we were all the same? Oh, this would be horrific. But I really believe that we need to just accept ourselves for who we are, and that some days are going to be better than others. And so to get to that place where we say, okay, now I'm ready to embark on this diet and exercise program, and also paying attention to my spiritual life, whether that's as a Christian or whether that's as a spiritualist or a Buddhist or whatever you are, is to say, I need a foundation and a grounding. Because if I don't have that, I will not succeed in meeting my goals. And I did watch one of your other conversations with, I believe it was your aunt.
Yes, Joanna.
That was
journey one.
That was very powerful. And I believe she expressed some of those same feelings and beliefs, that she had to have the support of her family and her friends and her circle, but she also needed to stay rooted in her faith to know that that's what God had wanted of her. I mean, the Bible also tells us, and I may not have the quote right, that, our body is a tent for who we, all our lives. That's what we're given to do God's work on this earth. And until we can accept that that's what we have and make it the best we can be for God, then we're not going to succeed, I don't think. So, I don't have to tell you, so many diets and exercise programs, people don't succeed, or they have great success, and then a year later, they're right back where they started from.
Yeah, it's all that, it's focusing mostly on like action and doing versus, sitting and just kind of being in your body for a minute and realizing, I mean, it might be uncomfortable, but if it's uncomfortable, then that's going to show you what you need to do or why you need to do it. And I love that you said, at least with me, like, trust that God loves us, and that's like that is reflected in the way that we care for ourselves. If we can trust that we are loved, because I think, again, in the conversation with Joanna, hitting the bottom of the barrel, and probably a lot of the people that you've worked with are feeling like they're in a lower point of their life, like maybe not the best point of their life. But if we can trust that even there, right, there's still someone who wants the best for us.
Right, exactly.
We can, and I think as Christians, we have, our God, and we can trust that He wants the best for us. And, but having that is such a crucial thing.
Yeah. And every once in a while, I would love to just chat with Jesus. I want to have a little chat with Jesus, as the song goes, because I think when He said, love your neighbor as yourself, either He didn't expand on that enough, or whoever wrote the words didn't expand on enough, because I think what He didn't say there, love your neighbor as yourself. So you've got to love yourself too.
Right.
I mean,
well, and I think that's exactly, like I would have loved to have been there and heard that, because what was that in the context of, we can dig deeper into the Bible and see that,
oh, for sure,
He does want us to love ourselves, but like, absolutely. Like if you really despise yourself, like, well, maybe we shouldn't be like going through that teaching right now, but learning to love yourself is huge. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's the pastor in me wanting to go deeper.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we kind of cover what we want to cover, but if there's anything additional that you would like to chat about, or if you would just want to give us some information, because I'm sure somebody's wanting to hear a little bit more about your ministry or your church, or get in contact with you.
Well, we have a website for our church, and people can reach me through that. It's www.psuc.ca. So it's Princess Street United Church, but PSUC. We are on Instagram at PSU Church, I think it is, or PS Church. I don't know. I always just automatically go on it. We have a Facebook page, Princess Street United Church, and Spirit Renewal Ministries, which is the ministry that my husband Stephen is the senior pastor of, has a website, www.spiritrenewalministries.com. And one of the things that you and I didn't talk about, because I know you talked about this with another guest that you have.
We can definitely go there.
Your recordings.
We can definitely go there.
I've been involved with Stephen's ministry, with Spirit Renewal Ministries, on some mission trips to Kenya and other places, but the last two have been to Kenya and East Africa. And those have been life-changing for me too, and really have affected my ministry and my understanding of how people's differences, but how we are very similar in many ways. That's really where I would leave that, because I know your other guest will share.
Well, but everyone's perspective is different. And, my friend Colleen, and I'm sure I'll have this chat out probably right after that one, is currently living in Uganda. So, I mean, her perspective is that of being a mother and living there.
Can imagine.
But I mean, for sure, definitely share. If there was anything like from that trip that you brought back, because wellness is a continuum, and this is something that I talk about all the time. It's not how I am right now. It's, I do these things. How are they going to impact my life for the good or the bad, or how do they make me better? So, share what's something from that trip that you brought back and that really impacted your life here.
Oh boy, there are so many things. We would need another 2 or 3 sessions. I'm thinking of one particular event. I had the great privilege of spending about 2 hours in a church with a group of approximately 50 or 60 widows. These women are mostly grandmothers. Some of them are moms. Well, they're all moms, but they're grandmothers looking after their grandchildren. And they have been widowed. They are looking after their grandchildren full time because their daughters or sons have been killed or died, if not, primarily AIDS or other physical ailments. And the other moved somewhere else to be with someone else, another partner, another wife or husband or partner. And the new partner does not want responsibility for looking after the children from that first marriage. So the children are left with their grandmothers, mostly grandmothers. And they live a very, very subsistent kind of life. Most of the grandmothers do not own land. Some do, but very few do own land. And their level of poverty is quite high. They might farm a little bit, or they might have a bit of an income. Some of them, the children cannot go to school because they have to pay fees to go to school. Mm-hmm. And there's not enough money to send them, or one child can go and then the next child has to wait until the child graduates from grade 8 before they can start school. Sometimes the grandmothers, widows, end up having to just go into the forest and gather firewood, which they take to the market and sell, and they make enough money to feed their grandchildren for the day. So I had the great privilege of being in this mud hut church, which was made of cow dung and mud with a tin roof, just hearing their stories and their joys and challenges. And their faith was so incredibly strong. They truly believe that God is with them on their journey, that Jesus is going to be with them, that's their hope and their light in the midst of it all. And in one way, it really strengthened my faith. And in another way, it made me really, I won't say ashamed of my faith, but I realized my faith really needed some more strengthening. Their stories were powerful, and I thought, wow, if me, who is from, by many world standards, a privileged life.
Oh, absolutely.
Not wealthy. I'm a pastor, but
privilege is privilege, and I think we sometimes, because we have the luxury of equating privilege with wealth, we do. If you look worldwide,
that's exactly.
If you have like a roof over your head and fully functioning windows, you're privileged.
Yeah, exactly. And air conditioning and food on the table that I don't have to go out and scrounge in the woods for. Mm-hmm. So that was a very, very profound experience for me, and I'm still processing it. That was this past January that I was there, and I still haven't really spent the time I need to focus on what that means in my faith journey. But I'm just going to leave that there. One of the things I am going to be doing, I'm going for an 8-day spiritual retreat, a silent retreat for 8 days. Me not talking for 8 days. Imagine that, Gretchen.
I can't. I hear about these things, and it's like, if I'm the kind of person, if I even saw it pop up like on my feed, I'm like, ee. Wow.
I'm actually going to Massachusetts to do it, because I wanted to go away from my home areas.
Oh yeah, I think you'd have to.
So that one of the things I'm praying that I'll be able to do is to spend some time reflecting on that experience. So that was one of the things. I mean, there were so many that you couldn't even name them all, but that was a powerful time, and I'm very privileged. And I told the women that because they were letting me into their world,
Oh my gosh.
Incredibly open in their sharing, and very, pardon the pun, down to earth. They were just opening their hearts, and I thought, wow, that's. I mean, the hair on my arms is standing. You can't see it, but it's standing straight up as I tell you that. So yeah.
Well, and I think this is the second time having this conversation with someone about being in another culture and being receptive to what you can learn from that. I think a lot of people, and I know the ministry that you went with, and I understand y'all were there almost as educators. It wasn't. It was a very different. For those of you that are listening, they work with pastors, so it's kind of different than going out to the villages and like quote unquote preaching to just lay people, I guess. So it's a little different in that respect already, but coming into a culture and then stepping back and say, okay, what can I learn from you? I think is just like, it gives me the chills, because so many people are like, I'm going to go and I'm going to teach this thing. And it's like, well, that's okay. But what if you just received and experienced and bottom line, what we always go back to, built relationships. Like,
Yes.
don't let that stay in its happy, friendly place. Like, build the relationships you didn't think you would build.
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Exactly. And that's a big part of what the ministry does there. They've been going there for 10 years now, to various parts of East Africa, but primarily northwest Kenya. And it's been very much building the relationships and seeing the same people time after time, and forming committees and teams that are now working on behalf of the ministry over there. And as you mentioned, Gretchen, the work that's done there is not going in and just trying to convert people to Christianity. It's working with pastors and running teaching conferences in churches and with pastors who are hungry to learn more about what it means to be a pastor and how they can be better ministers and pastors for the people in their churches and their villages, etc. And so it is different. And again, it's the word that comes to my mind, and as you were reflecting on it, is humility. Is going in with a spirit of compassion and humility, is saying, I'm humbled to be here. And it's not humility that, oh, I bow down and, we sometimes in our context, I think in our North American context, we think of humility as, being less than. And that's not what it is. It's opening ourselves up to say, what can I learn? What can I receive? How can we build that relationship of mutuality? So we're each learning from each other the way that we're intended to do in relationships. So yeah, I think that's really important.
Well, good. I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad we didn't just put that one under the table, because that was good stuff.
Yeah.
And I have to, I just like, because I was thinking about when I originally wrote some questions, kind of went back and forth with what I was going to ask, but I just remember, and it's seared in my brain, that picture of you jumping. So this is, I'm just going to kind of say, like, there was a song, and we went to this yoga and tea, and she showed us pictures, and this whole church is jumping. They're jumping around, like, because the song is, it's something we are jumping in the.
There is something today in the house of the Lord.
Right. And then it
changed the verses, so there is jumping today in the house of the Lord. There is singing, there is praying, and you do the actions.
And it was great. And then, and I kind of felt sorry. They're like, we're doing this on Sunday in church. So I think it was your husband led it in church that Sunday.
Yes, yeah.
Y'all, I was jumping. But you could see people like, doesn't this belong in like the children's church? It was great. And I was like, but I just remember seeing those pictures, like, if we could bring some of that joy in here, that would be awesome. Like, that would be church, let's jump around. And that might be a way, like, if people did more of that stuff, like, hey, maybe we can minister to, like you're saying, the marginalized, just by letting those people with really hard, like that have a hard time sitting through a service. Yeah, let's jump around. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I heard you say the word joy. And that is something that I really experienced when I was in Kenya, and when I've been on other ministry and mission trips in the Caribbean, and when I've worshiped in some of the African American churches in the States, is the expression of joy. And it's a cultural context for sure, because I think, many in sort of probably your and my context, that's not how we worship. We've been raised to sit quietly in church and you absorb, and yes, you might sing during the hymns, and perhaps you get up and shake someone's hand during the passing of the peace. But my gosh, if you just jumped up during a hymn and started dancing around, they'd probably haul you right out, right?
Right. Well, I mean, I think in a good way, we're getting a little off subject, but we are seeing some of the more non-denominational churches kind of bringing some of that in. And it's okay. And I like that. Like, I just, I like the idea of just being okay with what you're okay with. But there's still room for people that are like, that's not me. Oh, did I lose you? Oh, no. Oh, you're there.
we're back.
So, yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can tie that in with fitness too.
Yeah, well,
part of our spiritual and physical fitness moving together. How do you like that segue?
I love it. Perfect. Okay, we're starting our own church called the Church of Fitness.
Yes, I love it. I love it. The Joy Church of Fitness.
Perfect. We'll be
Yes.
in your local gym in a week, guys. Be on the lookout. We're taking over the world. Well, it has been just wonderful having you here, and I will include some links. I know you sent me some website links to like your church and your ministry, and I will include those on this description. If you're on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, I'll include it in the little comment section.
Good. And if anybody wants to connect and chat about fitness and spirituality or anything else, they can reach me through those sites or on Facebook or whatever. And I love talking, as you can tell, even though I'm going on an 8-day retreat. But
I can't wait to hear how that turns out. I'm excited.
Yeah, I love to talk about faith and fitness and all kinds of things. So, yeah, thank you very much for the privilege of being on your interview, and I've enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you again.
Alrighty.
What a great conversation with a super awesome person. As usual, the conversations start somewhere and they get sidetracked and they go off into Never Never Land. But every single time at the end of one of these conversations, I think to myself, man, that was perfect. That's exactly what we needed to talk about. And today was no different. So hopefully you stuck around till the end and heard us talk about, just everything under the sun. But what I really would love to hear is what you got out of this conversation. What was your little aha moment, or what opened your eyes to anything, to your social wellness by relating to the marginalized, or is it something in your spiritual wellness or even physical wellness? We talked about fitness. She's a group fitness instructor. She volunteers at her local Y, which we didn't even get into, but what an amazing woman. So please, wherever you're watching this, wherever you're listening to this, give me a comment. Let me know what your little aha moment was today, okay? Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you right back here.